pitch, runner goes. Fly ball to deep right. Going back, Spooner at the track, and it's gone. A home run for Michael Busch, and that time he finally made him pay.
With the 31st selection, the 2019 MLB Draft, the Los Angeles Dodgers select Michael Busch, a second baseman from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Just going to watch this one fly. Mac Horvath with his second of the game, and that is a bomb out to left field.
All right, guys. I love that video. I love playing that video every once in a while. Let me get some music a little bit higher up here now. I turn that music off. All right, what's up? Canes, what's up, man? First guy in. Canes, we'll take. Remember, I DM'd you. We're not going to be giving away any names, though. Okay, just so you know. Yeah, guys. So got a lot to talk about today. Really crazy article that came out on Yahoo Sports last night. I have a video coming out later today that's going to cover that entire thing. We'll talk about it in some detail today. And essentially, it's the Power Four conferences kind of making their move, right? They're seeing the NCAA kind of get all this power taken from them, and it's them making their move. And it's not quite, they're not pushing for the super conference or leaving, but we're getting to that point, guys, where the Power Four conferences, Zach, good afternoon. Zach, what's up, man? Welcome back. Bill, afternoon. What's up, Bill? Mike, ski. Good afternoon, Mike. Welcome back to the chat. It's getting to that point, guys, where the Power Four knows it has so much power. And you combine that with the NCAA just losing all these battles in court, right? NIL, portal, the JUCO thing, which probably will eventually be a widespread rule. Obviously isn't yet. And then this article comes out talking about the Power Four conferences all joining together saying, we want more control, not only over policy or rules decisions, but also postseason format, not just conference tournaments, but also like NCAA tournament in baseball. So what you're seeing, and even later down in the article, and we'll get into it, basically the Power Four conferences they're not pushing it super hard yet, but like they will at some point if the NCAA doesn't go along with this, and we're still in the very early stages of it, right? They will at that point be able to say, like, if we're not given what we want or close to what we want, we will leave the NCAA and make our own thing. Now, they did, with the House settlement, the Power Four conferences did agree to stay with the NCAA until 2035. So it may be something where we see them say, you know what, 2036, we're going to have everything. And And really, this isn't something that can happen overnight, right? The Power Four conferences can't just say, all right, we're leaving the NCAA. I mean, they got to get TV deals done, and they already have somewhat of that, right? They have ACC network, your SEC network, you got your conference networks, but there'd be a whole lot of stuff in the background that would need to be figured out. So we're seeing the very beginnings of this kind of clash between the NCAA and the Power Fours. And in the article, you do have some quotes from the FCS schools and others that are kind of like, it's basically saying it's moving in that direction. Canes, that is what needs to happen. The NCAA is a clown show. Yeah, I mean, it's not going well for them. Conyo, bro, shaking my head. You must be from Miami, you know what that means. They need to leave the NCAA next year. The thing is, and we'll get into the article, Canes, but I'm sure there is some kind of clause in the agreement. But with this House settlement that gets finalized here, sometime this spring, they agreed to stay. We'll get into the article. I want to be perfectly clear about the language, what it says, but basically it says they've agreed to stay with the NCAA until 2035. But we'll see, right? There's always ways to get out of things. We're also going to cover, guys, like the new reality. A lot of freshmen, not just like your run-of-the-mill freshman that could be a decent player, like your elite freshmen are getting told from schools, hey, you're not going to be playing this year, right? You're not going to be getting at bats, and it's done in the right way. I want to be perfectly clear about this. The coaches really are looking out for the player when they say that, because they're saying, listen, you came in, you had a chance to win a job. It just didn't perform well enough for that. If you go to JUCO, you get some at-bats, show what you can do, like, we'll take you back. And that's a lot of times what these coaches say is like, listen, go to this. You're not going to get any at-bats this year. So you're either going to waste the whole spring sitting on the bench, or you can go to a JUCO, start playing right away. And, you have a chance to get drafted, but you also have a chance to up your stock, come back, or go to another school and play, right? So we'll get into that. Obviously, there's a major story going on about that right now. I have some inside info to it. And then, could the NCAA tournament format change? With this document, with this article that's come out, that is what the Power Four conference is, or the Power Four conferences are kind of pushing for. They want more control, not only over their conference tournament. I do think the SEC tournament, to me, is probably the best format. The ACC tournament, to me, is a terrible format. I hate it. And so they would have more control over that stuff. They'd have more control over the NCAA tournament format as well. And we'll talk about some of the changes that I think, and a lot of people in college baseball want what kind of changes they want and are looking for in the NCAA tournament. So we'll get all into that. Canes also means they didn't make a wise decision, and why you need advisors or someone with experience guiding you. You know what, Canes, that can be true, but remember, sometimes even to an advisor's eye, I mean, listen, evaluation is not perfect, right? And you can set up a kid for success. And like, again, what I did with the Matthew Shorey kid was just lay out, what his options were, where it looked like the best opportunities were going to be, and what the competition was going to be like at all those different levels or all those different schools. And then it's up to the player to really go in and show out. So it could be the player goes, like I tell every one of my clients, I say, listen, I'm going to advise you on all these schools where I think maybe the best opportunity is, but then it's ultimately your decision. I'm not going to tell you where to go. You need to be the one to take your this is your career. This is your college career. You got to be 100% all in on where you go. And then ultimately it's up to your performance in the fall. So it could be a perfect situation really, but you don't look good in the fall. There's nothing that can be done, right? You go into like a situation like I did at Georgia Tech with 3 outfield spots open. I had as much opportunity as anyone to get on the field as a freshman. If I had just kind of laid a goose egg in the fall, I'm not playing, right? I didn't earn it. And that's, unfortunately, I mean, that is the reality, right? You're not, no matter how highly touted you are out of high school, you are not guaranteed a spot in a starting lineup, ever. Don't fool yourself if you think that's the reality. because you're this high-ranked kid or you got drafted out of high school. I played with a lot of guys that got drafted out of high school and then they really didn't play at all in whichever school they went to. They might have got a couple shots, but they didn't show what they could do and perform well, and then they were ultimately just kind of riding the bench. Canes, at Miami, we will be starting one freshman at center field because he's an elite defensive player, can't hit for nothing at the moment. And again, you know what, Canes? There are some guys who don't particularly look great in the fall, but when the real games start and they're a gamer, like I'll tell you, my freshman fall at Georgia Tech, I don't even know what my numbers were. I know I had professional at bats. I know I worked walks. I had quality at bats. I put the barrel on the baseball pretty consistently. I wouldn't say I tore it up in the fall, but I showed that I was a leadoff type hitter. I had that approach. And then when the games came on, I probably played a lot better than I did in the fall. Dusty, couldn't disagree more. If you are a blue chip prospect, you will certainly get the first 5 bites of the apple. They will get to fail 10 times before the walk-on get a chance. Well, we're not talking about walk-ons, Dusty. I mean, that's different. We're talking about, again, it's all about how you perform. And we'll get into that, Dusty, because we got some information on a highly touted prospect that you probably heard a story about come out the last couple of days. And so, we'll get into it right now. So obviously Michael Mullinax at University of Georgia, one of the highest ranked players in his class, let alone in the state of Georgia, the number one outfielder in the state of Georgia, blue chip prospect, like you said, Dusty. From talking to some guys that know what went on and what's going on, he transferred to Chipola. And a lot of the conversation on social media was he wants to get drafted. And, he made that decision. He wants to go get drafted or whatever. What I said yesterday without knowing any information was and Dusty, you would agree with me. I mean, it's very rare. You don't really ever see a guy leave a top 10 team in the country, top 15 team in the country like Georgia to go to junior college to get drafted. You just don't. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but you don't see that happen very regularly, if ever. And from talking to the guys I know, it was their view that he was not going to get any playing time. That's what he was told. And he was basically told, if you're not going to get any, you're not really going to be getting any at bats. You probably should go to junior college, get at bats. If you ball out, you do really well, we'd love to have you back. But really, it was more in the sense, and like it was for they wanted what was best for the player. And they're like, listen, you're not going to get any better not really playing at all this fall or this spring. So you're right, Dusty, in the sense that sure, the blue chip guy is going to get, generally speaking, more opportunities than like a walk-on. But ultimately now, in the current climate, you have so many portal guys coming in that are proven assets in college baseball that you're just not going to see. It's going to be very hard to get playing time, even if you are a blue chip guy. Remember, I mean, this guy was considered, left-handed bat, center fielder, could really run, athletic, and was basically told, hey, you're just not going to get you're not really going to be getting any at bats this spring. So it's, it's different than when I was playing. You're not. Guys, teams are bringing in 10 portal guys. And if you're competing against portal guys with proven stuff, I mean, it's really tough. Canes has 100% agree with Dusty. Yeah, I mean, it is true to a sense, but it's just this environment now is totally different. I see it with my own eyes, but I will tell you one thing, though. Dusty, they only get so many chances. We brought in 2 freshman shortstop this year, one that got drafted by the Reds and one that was our last signee. The last signee is going to likely be our first guy off the bench or our starting shortstop if we don't do what I think we will do. We also almost cut the kid that got drafted by the Reds. And Kyle, my point about advisors, if he would have came to a school like Miami, he could have likely started because we're starting a freshman at center field. Sure. And the tough thing is this. The tough thing is this, Canes. What you don't know, and the tough thing now is you just don't know 2 weeks before campus start or before school starts. You don't know who that school is going to bring in the portal. So it could look great on paper when a kid's making a decision to commit, but then 3 weeks before school starts, all of a sudden they bring in 2 guys at your position. So it's hard. It's a lot harder to make. You can look at the roster layout. You can look at the recruiting classes that are coming in ahead of you and your recruiting class, but ultimately you don't know who they're going to go after in the portal, and that's what makes it difficult. And UGA brought in a lot of transfers in the outfield like we did. Dusty Isaac, UGA returning 0 guys hitting above 300, and he wasn't going to be getting any at bats. Come on, Kyle. Well, Dusty, I mean, I'm not going to give away my sources, but it's someone involved in that staff told me that directly last night. So, I'm not making that up. It's definitely not coach propaganda. And I'll tell you what was exactly said was, he was a guy that was very highly ranked as a sophomore in high school. So he kind of had that PG hype, really, really advanced guy for like a freshman and sophomore in high school, and really just did not get a whole lot better over the next couple years, from what I was told. And really just kind of in the fall, just didn't outshine other guys, outshined him. And, what I was told was they really are focused more on the offensive side. They want bats over athletes. So if you can hit a 3-run home run, you're more likely to play. And that was their decision and their strategy. So certainly not making it up. That's what I was told by someone I trust. So again, it's just like I've been telling you guys, it's a lot more competitive environment now for freshmen to come in and get get playing time. Because even if you're neck and neck with the guy who got brought in a portal in the fall, and you guys are kind of equal in performance, if that guy's got 500 at bats in college baseball under his belt at 330 and 10 pumps a year, they're going to lean towards that guy more. And so that was kind of the reality there. Dusty thinks it's coach propaganda. Haha. They also signed a top 3 transfer class, though, Dusty. Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's now as a high school player, I mean, you got to take into account, without knowing exactly who they're going to go after, is this school bringing in a lot of transfer guys every year? You have to know that the guy, you will not know how many transfer portal guys they're going to bring in. Right. And if they can go after like Kane said, they got a top 3 transfer class. If they can get studs in the portal, they're going to be better. And so those guys are going to perform. So they're going to go with those guys all the time. I'm going to go with the chances that he was told he won't get at bats. You need proven guys now, man. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I was told. It's like he was told, hey, go to junior college, get some at bats. You're going to be draft eligible. If you ball out, maybe you get drafted, and but I was told, listen, the quote was, if perfect game rankings weren't a thing, this guy probably wouldn't have been as highly thought of as he was. And it was because, he was so highly ranked as a high school player early in his career that it kind of made him look like a better player than he was when he really wasn't. Again, that's not to say he's a bad player. It's just he wasn't as good as I think a lot of people thought. He has more than 500 at bat, Kyle, because he's played summer ball for 2 years and got over 200 in summer ball. Exactly. Yeah, you're right. So I mean, you have 500 bats in college games, and then you got an extra 150 to 300 in summer ball over 2 years. So you're right, Gaines. I mean, you got almost 1,000 at bats, right, under your belt against college competition. So that's the big thing, and that's what guys are looking for now. That's what they value, proven. And I've told you guys this. The strategy now is you can get, like, every coach at the ABCA last week said the same thing. Like, you can win with decent hitters. You can't win with decent pitching. Your average pitcher now is just not good enough to put wins on the board. If you go after elite arms in high school and you get a few elite arms in the portal, you're gonna be okay with just an okay offense. Whereas when I was playing in the dead ball era, you needed elite bats because average pitchers could still perform well enough to win. But if you didn't have good bats and your team batting average was 230, which that was very common for a team to have like a 240 or 250 batting average, you're going to get smoked by a team with like a 300 batting average. And now, almost every team in the conference has around a 300 or higher batting average as a team. And high OPSs. You look at the returning OPSs for a lot of these Power 4 schools, it's like over 1,000, over 1,000, over 1,000, over 1,000. So you just don't need to recruit really good high school hitters because you can get really good hitters in the portal. Did all the coaches you talked to mention anything about freshmen playing summer ball or about them bringing freshmen on campus in the summer? You know what, Canes, I really didn't talk about that much. I forgot to bring that up. I will say, I can tell you every coach would agree that like at bats are king. It's my thing is like bringing guys in early. It's just not, and it's not just the kid at UGA. I know another kid at another SEC school who was basically told the same thing. Very highly touted kid coming out of high school who is also now at a junior college. And so you're just seeing this more and more. Like I said, another kid at an SEC school, very similar situation, was told the same thing. Go to junior college, get at bats. He's a two-way guy, so get some reps on the mound. And hey, we'll take you back, but you're just not going to get a lot of playing time this year, and you're not going to develop because of that. So let's get into this article though that I will bring up here. And we're gonna kind of speed through it. We don't need to. In the video I have coming out later today, I kind of go read through the whole thing and give you guys kind of an in-depth look at it. But here we go. Power conferences seeking more control over NCAA championships, governance. Canes, and when you mention Clemson's number to any of the coaches, eyes get wide open? No, actually. I think most people knew that was that's going on. And like I said, Canes, there's actually a lot of schools who originally had told me they're not going to be able to get, they don't think they're going to go any higher in scholarships yet. But now all the pressure that's coming from these schools that are going way up on scholarships is kind of moving the needle for a lot of other schools. Because if you go to your AD and say, this school is going to all full rides, or this school is going to 25 full rides, you say, listen, if you want us to compete and win championships, we can't be operating at 11.7 scholarships. We got to get something more. So it's not Canes. So it's confirmed. Let's go. It's not 100% confirmed, but that is what coaches are hearing. So, shout out our source. Miami. Okay. A proposal from power conferences stands to potentially remake the NCAA governance and championship structure, shifting more authority to the power leagues over rulemaking, policy decisions, and even postseason events. One of the things that they talk about in this article is they want to increase the amount of teams that go into the NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness. And one of the reasons why, the Power Fours don't necessarily want to separate from the NCAA because they bring up in this article the March Madness tournament is the largest revenue stream bringing in money for the NCAA. It's over $1 billion. And the reason people love March Madness is because not only do you have Power Four schools in there, but you have the mid-majors who kind of are looked at as the Cinderella story, and a lot of them end up doing really well. Like in basketball, and I've always told you guys, basketball and baseball are very similar in a sense that you have a lot of really good mid-major schools in baseball that compete very closely with the Power Fours. So the baseball tournament and the basketball tournament are very highly viewed things for the NCAA because you're getting to see a bunch of different schools that you're not used. In football, it's like, you know, the 12-team playoff is Power 4 teams. That's just how it is, right? It's like, all right, who's coming from the Big 10? Who's coming from the Big 12? Who's coming from the SEC? Who's coming from the ACC? You're almost never going to see a mid-major team in there. And baseball and basketball are completely different, where like you see mid-majors win those tournaments all the time. You see them competing very well and getting into reaching the late stages of the baseball tournament, the basketball tournament. I do think you could see some changes. We'll talk about it here soon to the baseball tournament. Changes that a lot of people in baseball have wanted to see. But let's keep going through this article. So, however, as the NCAA works to establish a new governance model to coincide with the landmark settlement of the House antitrust case, the document indicates a clear direction from the SEC, from the Power Four. They want an expansion of their previously existing autonomous legislative powers, not only for rulemaking and policy decision, but for NCAA championships as well, controlling concepts like tournament format, revenue distribution, and selection committee process. So this is the Power Four conferences making their move. They're seeing the weakening authority of the NCAA, and the Power Four is rightfully so are saying, we bring in all the revenue, we're the ones paying all the big NIL deals, we're the ones bringing in all the viewership. To a large extent, we need more authority in some of these tournament formats and everything like that. When reached, each power conference confirmed the existence of this proposal. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey cautioned that the proposal is only a conversation starter as all of Division I leaders examine a new governance model. There have been 7 to 8 months of discussions about the NCAA governance decision-making process. Sankey told Yahoo Sports, "We have a responsibility to develop an idea. We've circulated this with our conferences. We've let the NCAA president know this is an important time for change. We think it is important to provoke thought." ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, a member of the NCAA Board of Governors, said leaders are attempting to find a governance structure that fits modern college athletics. So with all these changes, the traditional authority and rules and how everything has worked for a long time does not really make sense anymore. More work needs to be done, he said. To me, this is part of the ongoing evolution of college athletics. So again, the Power Fours are kind of pouncing on the weakening authority of the NCAA and trying to gain more control over how the NCAA rules, policies, and tournament structures are looking. Derek, welcome back. Derek, how you doing, man? How many opening day starters in the SEC got benched last year for not performing? You never see other guys get opportunities once the season starts. No, you do, Derek. I mean, that is true, right? The issue is and for example, in 2011, my freshman year, you would always see, and even in the Power Fours, you'd see 2, 3, 4. I mean, we had 5 freshmen in our starting lineup opening night. And so generally, what you had in the past is you had, 2 or 3 freshmen starting. You had a couple sophomores that really hadn't played much. You'd have them getting thrown into the lineup. Because remember, the draft was 40 rounds, 50 rounds, 60 rounds back then. So if you were a really good college player, you were getting drafted and you were leaving. So you were always having to fill 4 or 5 spots in your lineup, maybe a spot or 2 in the starting rotation, key bullpen spots with newcomers. Guys that really had to kind of prove themselves over a season. And what would happen is, Derek, for example, usually the first 4 weeks of the season, 3 or 4 weeks, depending on which conference you play in, before your conference schedule starts, that's the time when teams are trying to look at, okay, these newcomers that are in the lineup, who's going to win the spot? Who are going to be our guys we're going to go to war with in conference play? So you always saw, when I was playing, and really up until 3 or 4 years ago, you saw a lot of kind of turnover in the lineup because a guy would start the first couple weekends and he was hitting like 180, not doing much. Well, you'd give another guy a shot. And if that guy ended up raking for a couple games or a few weeks, then it was his job to lose. And so you saw a lot of turnover at minimum like 2 or 3 spots in the lineup because you were trying to find the guy who was going to stick. You still see that happening some, Derek, but the issue is when you bring in, like I said, guys with 500 at-bats under their belt in college games and then the summer ball at-bats that they've had as well, generally you're going to give them more leeway because they've proven it over a course of a couple seasons. So when they struggled like the first weekend of a season, you're not hitting the panic button as a coach because you're thinking, okay, he's a little cold to start, but he's going to figure it out. He's a 330 hitter and 500 at-bats in his career. We're not too worried. When it was a freshman or a sophomore who really had never started before and had no at-bats under his belt, you immediately would start to think, he may not be able to handle this. So that's the issue. Is now you're still going to see some turnover in the lineup, like you said. Guys are going to get benched, and other guys are going to get opportunities. But it's just when a guy has 600 at-bats under his belt, you're going to give him more leeway to fail. So if he struggles out of the gate, I'll give you an example. The DH for Georgia Tech last year, who came from Indiana, he caught and he DH'd. Started out really slow for like the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, but ultimately by the end of the year was hitting like 310 with 17 jacks or whatever it ended up being. Now, when I was playing, if that was a newcomer, he would have never gotten the opportunity to turn that ship around. So it is different now with the leeway these guys have that are coming in from the portal because they have those at-bats under their belt. And so coaches are, it's easier for them to say, all right, he'll figure it out. We're gonna let him try. So get right here into the March Madness thing. Sankey and other commissioners say, and there remains a commitment to continue to grant broad access to postseason events. That includes the NCAA basketball tournaments, 2 events that, and they don't include baseball here, but that same thing, 2 events that give automatic qualifiers to the champions of all 32 Division I leagues. So same thing in baseball. You win your conference championship, you get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. That's why those conference tournaments for the mid-major schools, unless you have just a really good record and a high RPI and you could get a large bid, generally your mid-majors, they have to win their conference tournament to make it to the NCAA tournament. But it allows for schools of all levels in Division I to make it to the tournament. Even a low major D1 wins their conference, they're in the tournament. The tournament, dubbed March Madness, is the crown jewel of NCAA sports, perhaps most popular for its feel-good upsets from low-seeded mid-major programs. The men's event is worth nearly $1 billion annually, by far the association's biggest cash cow that sustains the athletic budgets for many non-football and FCS programs. So if you're the Power Fours, you don't necessarily want to separate from the NCAA unless you feel like it gets to that point, because you are involved in some aspects like the NCAA tournament, March Madness. I would include baseball in that. I mean, it's getting bigger and bigger every year, and it's becoming more of a cash cow as well. And some potential changes to the tournament format could make it even bigger. But, it's something about, you lose the pageantry of it if you kind of make your own super conference. So the Power Four they're not just going to do that right away unless they feel like they're not given the proper respect and authority within the NCAA that they think they should have. We still view the championships as binding us together, Sankey said. The basketball tournament is a national and American experience. I do think what happens in March is pretty cool. The Cinderella stories are part of the fabric, and we respect that reality. Not very strong wordage, though. He's not like, man, we never want to be away from this. He's basically saying, we respect it. We understand what it is. We would like to stay, basically saying we would like to still be involved. Also depends if they are higher ranked. Perfect example is Antonio Jimenez, perfect game warrior, top 60 player at shortstop, had 16 errors last year for us, batted .220 and always got opportunities. Eric Fernandez, top 1,000 player, went 2 for 8, didn't make errors. Yeah, and every coaching staff is going to be different, Canes. And again, it's like it depends on the depth at your position. If you think, all right, we don't really have a great bat at shortstop, we don't have a difference maker bat, you're going to go with the best defender. Or if you don't really have a guy, if you don't think there's one guy who's a substantially better defender, you're going to go with that maybe higher ceiling guy who, if he does figure it out, he's going to bring a lot more value. But every coaching staff is different on how quick they're going to pull the trigger on guys. Kyle, do we know what baseball programs are actually generating Do we know what baseball programs are actually generating revenue? I imagine it's very few. Need to continue to ride the backs of NCAA basketball and college football. No, I mean you're right. It's not a large amount. I mean, certainly you got your SEC schools like Mississippi State and LSU. I mean, Clemson. You do have schools in the Power Four that are baseball teams that are bringing in profit for their schools. But what we're talking about more so is the NCAA tournament and how much revenue that is able to bring in for NCAA schools in the revenue share model. So the money that comes in for that is going to be, obviously your host site is going to get a lot of that money, but you're also going to be able to spread that out through revenue share as well. But baseball is, Dusty, is getting to, we're moving closer and closer to more teams being a net positive on the balance sheet for schools. Certainly we're not anywhere close to what football is, right? I mean, we're not anywhere close to that. But as baseball continues to grow and the viewership continues to grow and the TV deals, we're like, that's going to be, as the TV deals bring in more and more money, it makes it easier for schools. So, in 5 or 10 years from now, TV deals could get upgraded. And all of a sudden, you're not just counting on fans coming to the game, but you're also getting money from TV deals and everything like that. We lost our elite defender shortstop in the 6th round of the Reds the year before. He's in Double-A now. We had no shortstop. Yeah, and so that makes sense why, Canes. Like, if you don't have a guy who's a standout guy at shortstop or either an elite defender, you got to kind of pick and choose. You got to pick out of the worst, if you don't really feel great about any of them, you just kind of, you go with your gut on who you think is the best one. Women's basketball is a lot of schools makes more money than baseball. 100%. 100%. I mean, basketball in general is, obviously one of the highest revenue bringer. I mean, you have a big tournament, like you have a big stadium, you have a good team, and you're bringing in a lot of money. So you're right, Canes. I mean, women's basketball does bring in a lot of money. Women's volleyball as well. I know at Georgia Tech brings in, I think, maybe the 3rd most money or 4th most money. So, it's some sports it's just different. LSU Canes or Dusty Isaac says, yep, LSU women's basketball probably makes more money than LSU baseball. Honestly, I don't know, dude. LSU baseball sells out at like 12,000 plus fans almost every game. So they could be, right? Mississippi State, for example. I mean, they got a massive stadium that gets sold out. Texas A&M, massive stadium that gets sold out. So a lot of the SEC schools are there. A smaller percentage of the ACC schools are there. Now that you have Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC, I mean, certainly those schools are going to bring in a lot of money as well. Oklahoma State in the Big 12 does a good job. So it's growing, but it's right now. I mean, the SEC is king of baseball schools that bring in, they're not net negatives for their schools. Phillips called the tournament a national treasure, and he remains adamant in access points for all leagues. Brett Yormark, commissioner of the Big 12, calls the proposal part of a complete review of the entire model and a necessary modification to provide greater authority to the power leagues. Tell that to Angel Reese. You tell it to her, Dusty. You tell it to her. We have no desire to compromise what makes college athletics so special, but instead we want to make necessary adjustments to reflect where the industry is going. Again, it's just them saying, hey, we need more power. However, there is fear that granting the power conferences control of these marquee postseason events will limit opportunities for those mid-majors and possibly even reduce their revenue shares from the tournament. Power leagues, specifically the Big Ten and SEC, used threats of a breakaway to consolidate more revenue during college football playoff negotiations last spring. The 4 leagues also spearheaded negotiations over the House settlement, agreeing to millions of dollars in back damages to former athletes, a portion of which will be paid by the non-power conferences without gaining their input. The moves have more rapidly grown a gulf between the 4 richest conferences in college athletics and everyone else. Already separated by massive resource and money gaps, the 2 groups, some believe, are nearing an untenable situation, roaring toward an eventual divorce. So what we said, Dusty, you brought this up, a week or 2 ago about the super conference. I mean, that's kind of the pressure that the Power Four is putting on the NCAA right now. It's like, listen, if we don't get what we want, we could always break away. And how many people are going to watch your tournament if the SEC and ACC and Big 12 and Big 10 aren't involved? Right? That's how much revenue are you going to lose as the NCAA if the Power Four conferences are not involved anymore? That's their leverage. This could be a real fight over the future of what college athletics looks like, one FCS leader said. At some point, we're going to have to call their bluff and say, take your ball and go. It seems to me that we are increasingly closer to that happening. So this FCS leader, who's anonymously quoted, says, all right, is the Power Four bluffing? Or are they really going to do this? At some point, we can't just let them run all over us. It's either call their bluff and see if they actually do it, and that's kind of the point we're heading to. The chances of the NCAA adopting the Power League's proposal is uncertain. The proposal was described by one as an aggressive solution that has real legs, but by another as having little to no chance to pass in its current iteration. If the Power Leagues don't get consensus and a full membership vote, they could withdraw from the association. However, that presents another problem. The Power Leagues and NCAA entered into a 10-year agreement as part of the House settlement, binding the entities together through 2035. So this House settlement that's already been approved, but it's not finalized yet until sometime this spring. When finalized, the Power Leagues are in a 10-year agreement till 2035 with the NCAA. So in theory, they would not be able to leave for 10 years. But like we know, you can fight a decision with another court case. Power Conference commissioners began to circulate the proposal to school presidents and administrators earlier this week, a decision that is not coincidentally timed. The annual NCAA convention begins next week in Nashville, where leaders of all three divisions meet to debate and discuss key legislation items. So next week, we should have some stuff coming out of this to figure it out. Kyle from Dusty, in this instance of a super conference, are you insinuating that it would be for all scholarship sports, or would it just be football? If all, some baseball powerhouses will be left out. Thoughts? No, that's the question, Dusty. The question is, is it just football, or do they bring all of their sports with them and leave the NCAA? To me, is the NCAA going to be, and maybe the NCAA doesn't even have the power to ask for anything, but is the NCAA going to allow the power conferences to say, well, football, we're not going to be a part of the NCAA, but all of our other sports will? That's the question. Because you rightfully say, if it's just power conferences, schools in baseball and basketball that are really good mid-major programs, like some of them you're bringing up here, like Fullerton, Long Beach, Coastal Carolina, you got Southern Miss, you got Louisiana Tech, you got Louisiana Lafayette, you got Texas State, Georgia Southern, Northeastern, UC Santa Barbara. You got schools all across the country that are Fresno State, Oregon State, who right now is independent, is not belonging to any conference. So you have some real powerhouse baseball programs that would not be included if it was just the Power Four schools. So that is the question, Dusty. And Eastern Carolina, good, yeah, another great one. We wouldn't be able to name all of them. Liberty is another good one. We won't be able to name all of them. Dallas Baptist, Canes, Ray. We keep coming with it. Dallas Baptist, that's right. Troy, right? Troy, UCF, USF, Florida International. The list, we could go on with just really good competitive mid-major schools that are a massive part of the baseball ecosystem, that are very well-known schools and do a great job, that would not be included. So until this thing actually starts to happen, we won't know for sure. So I really can't answer that question. I would hope that everyone stays under the NCAA bubble, because then you kind of lose that pageantry and kind of the history of the NCAA tournament, everything like that. So what are your thoughts? What do you expect to happen? What are your sources saying? Well, to me in this article, it's not like I haven't really talked to anybody about this in particular, because it just came out last night. I saw this last night at like 10 p.m. So I don't know. My thoughts are, I would think it would be, I would not like it if it's just a Power Four super conference and then all these other really good schools are not included, because I think there's something to those really good mid-majors going to battle in the NCAA tournament and taking down a top-ranked SEC or ACC or Power 4 team. There is something to that. So I would love to see that not happen. Obviously, I have no control over it, but I would hope that baseball in particular, I think the format that baseball has right now is really good. I think the tournament can change, and we can talk about that a little bit. I would like to see the regional system go away, meaning that first round with 4 teams, round robin tournament, double elimination. I don't really like it for multiple reasons. One, baseball is not a one game sport. I mean, you got to play a series. You got to play a series to really find out who the best team is. And in the regionals all the time, the other thing that's bad is it's really bad on the arms of pitchers, because you get down to that regional final game and you've played 5 games. You're going to have to use guys that have already pitched multiple times. That's just a reality that always occurs. And you're going to have to, it accentuates the teams that are really deep. It gives them an advantage. So your mid-major school that makes it to a regional final, going to be really tough to beat an SEC or an ACC school, because you just don't have quite the depth that most of those schools do. And you also, again, you're using guys 3 or 4 times on the weekend, when you could just make an extra round and have 2 teams playing each other on the weekend. And then the winner of both of those weekends, they play each other in the next week. And then those 2 teams, whoever wins that one, goes to the super regional, right? So you could just you would have to add an extra round. And all of a sudden you have everyone's playing a weekend series. You're going to have more host sites, which means more revenue coming in for the NCAA. And you have more opportunity to put these things on TV. So you get more revenue from the TV. And it just allows, again, it just allows for kind of the sport of baseball to be more pure. Because when you get to a regional, there's a reason they don't do that in the major leagues. They don't make, the best 4 teams from the AL and the best 4 teams from the NL, or the best 6 teams, or the best 2 wild cards play, and then they make it into the regional, and then 2 wild cards play, they make it into a regional, and then it's a round robin. It just doesn't make sense, because that's not how baseball is played. You lose that first game in the regional, you're really behind the 8 ball, because you're going to have to play a lot of games to get back to that regional final game. You lose the first game of a weekend series, you got to win the next 2. Simple as that. So it's just, I like that model a little bit better. I get the regionals can't be really exciting, but when you're talking about the health of the pitchers, and just kind of how baseball really is as a sport and how it should be played, and why you don't play 1 game against your ACC opponent, you play 3, because that's going to show you can win 2 out of 3. The best team's going to win 2 out of 3 most of the time. Okay, so we're going here. The whole point, Dusty says the whole point here is offer your, I think I did. That would also limit the coaching pool. Yeah, it would. How can a coach earn his stripes and go up the ranks? Yeah, it would have an impact on everything, right? We're so far away from it, Canes, it's hard to even extrapolate out, okay, what a system would look like with a super conference that's separate from the NCAA. Here's a good example. Would the teams outside of the NCAA still be able to play NCAA teams? So would the Power 4 schools in their super conference be able to schedule non-Power 4 schools? Because you play 50 games ish in your season before you make it to your conference tournament and then into the NCAA tournament. So how are you going to fill that whole schedule up with just Power 4 schools? Is that what we're going to do? Are there enough schools in the Power 4 to even do that and everyone have a legitimate schedule? It just it doesn't make a lot of sense schedule-wise to not be able to play any non-Power 4 schools. Derek, do you ever foresee Power 4 schools buying JUCO programs and using them as their minor league teams like the minor leagues? I don't think so. They don't need to buy them, Derek. They're already doing that, right? There are JUCOs that Send, like Southern Union in Alabama, they send a lot of guys to Auburn. Wallace State send a lot of guys to Auburn and Alabama. Your regional JUCOs are kind of that already for a lot of the Power 4 schools. And like I mentioned, like the Mullinax kid at Georgia, who's now at Chipola, they told him, hey, we'll take you back. Like, we just want you to get at bats, and you're not going to get at bats this year. So go get at bats, perform, come back. We'll take you. But the reality is a lot of kids are going to be like, after that happens, they're probably going to be like, I don't want to go back. But, so they don't need to buy the school, Derek. And again, then it would get into, all right, is it, even though it's a junior college, it's kind of a functionally the same school as the D1 school. So how do you do that? How does that, is that against the rules or not? They don't need to buy the JUCO program. They just need to have good connections there and recruit a lot of their guys. Or they tell the kid, and this does happen too, they'll say, hey, listen, we don't have a spot for you now. We like you. If you go to this junior college and, you get at bats and you perform, like, we'll be the first team to offer you. That gets done all the time. That gets said all the time. So it's already that kind of. Now, if this JUCO waiver becomes an all-encompassing thing, remember, right now, the JUCO waiver only applies to players that play junior college, and their eligibility ends this spring. So that only applies to guys whose eligibility ends this spring right now. But is it eventually going to be an all-encompassing rule? Probably. So they don't need to buy them. But it's a good question. Canes, you literally need what Evansville Ace did last year, and they still lost that game. Yeah. That's the reality for any mid-major or low D1 when they go into a regional in the NCAA tournament. They just have to have guys really step up and kind of play above their normal selves. You have to have guys that have big moments, that just have big performances in that situation, because depth-wise and talent-wise, Tennessee is going to pretty much out-talent and out-depth everybody, generally speaking. So for you to beat Tennessee, your 4 seed in a regional has probably got to beat them, right? Put them in the losers bracket, so they got to play a lot of games. And then they're probably going to find a way to make it back to the regional final, and you still got to find a way to beat them one more time. So it's just much harder in a regional sense for a lot of those schools, because you don't have 3 games to catch them on a bad weekend, or win a big Friday game, and now you're ahead to a 1-0, and you can kind of strategize over the next 2 games how to steal 1 win out. No way, Derek. That is expensive. Yeah, again, it's just like they don't need to do that. Okay, let's see here. Back to here. As part of the Power League proposal, the NCAA Board of Governors and D1 Board of Directors, the association's top governing groups, mostly made up of university presidents, are likely to see their authority limited. So the NCAA Board of Governors and D1 Board of Directors are going to lose power if this proposal were to come a thing. The intent of the proposal is to create uniform policy among, at the very least, the 4 leagues. For decades now, the NCAA has operated as a fractured group with more than 300 member schools in Division I alone, all with differing resources and cultural philosophies. Often misunderstood, the NCAA is a voluntary membership organization where schools create rules that the association then enforces. And here's the crux of the issue. However, those rules have come under attack by the courts and state lawmakers as violating antitrust law, many of them over the long-time policy prohibiting compensation to athletes. With those rules now crumbling, those money-generating powers within the 4 top leagues are moving closer to a professionalized model. Think about it, guys. In the Power 4, a lot of NIL money going around, even in baseball, football and basketball especially, right? Almost every football player in the Power 4 is getting some kind of NIL money, and you would be amazed at the amount of money a place kicker is getting. I know from a guy who knows that there's a place kicker in an ACC school who's an average place kicker. He's getting $250,000 a year to be the kicker. So the Power 4 conferences now are professional leagues. It's a professionalized model, and it's a shift that they feel like necessitates a whole structural change. In fact, in November, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey and his president sent a letter to Baker expressing disappointment in a governance model that the NCAA staff showed commissioners in a meeting over the summer and urging the association to grant the power leagues much more autonomy, not just in governance, but playing rules in championship tournaments. Sankey basically says here he's long expressed his dissatisfaction with the NCAA governance model because it's bureaucratic, it's slow, and he doesn't like the inclusion of lower tier school representatives on policy-making committees. So Sankey feels like, if you're a smaller school, you shouldn't be involved in making widespread policy, which, you can agree with that or disagree with it. That's what his opinion is. But lately, Sankey and other commissions, namely Yormack and Phillips from the Big 12 or the Big 12 and the ACC, have stumped for both more access points in championships for their programs and representation on NCAA championship selection committees. So what was the big controversy last year in the NCAA baseball tournament? It was LSU and Florida getting into the tournament. Both of them finished the year 13 and 17 in conference play. And it was a big controversy because, Florida's AD was on the decision-making committee or the selection committee for the tournament, and Florida ended up getting in, and ultimately ended up advancing and doing really well. And that was kind of used as proof of, well, they should have been in it. And I think you can go both ways. The problem is what's going on in baseball now is the ACC and the SEC in particular are so deep conference-wise that, you're 16 and 14 in the SEC, you have a good shot of hosting. You're 16 and 14 in the ACC, you have a good shot of hosting. And so what's the record in conference that makes you just ineligible for the tournament? Because if you're in the SEC, even if you're 13 and 17 in conference play, you're going to have a good RPI. You're going to have a great strength of schedule. And so you have a lot of these traditional markers that have been used to make decisions on who gets into the tournament. Well, when your conference is that deep, it doesn't matter really how you perform as long as you just kind of do okay, right? And even 13 and 17 is that's not even like okay. You take Georgia Tech, for example. They were, they went from, this is how I explain it, is that, they got swept by Boston College near the end of the first half of the ACC schedule. And they ended up having to sweat to get into the tournament, I think at 15 and 15. And if they had won 2 or 3 from Boston College or swept them, which is what a lot of people predicted, is that they would sweep them. Now think about their record. They're 18 and 12 in the ACC. They're 100% a host. Even at 17 and 13, they're probably a host. So a 2-game swing was a difference in them sweating on selection a day, or being a national seed probably. So that's how deep these conferences are. You have a tough weekend. It's a difference between you hosting or maybe not making the tournament. That is the only reason they got in. Kane says, yeah, probably. They were 30 and 27 overall. And that was the other argument was, it's not like, and again, it's hard to have a great record when you do that poorly in conference play, but when you're basically a 500 team overall, that's tough, right? That's tough. It'd be one thing if you're 35 and 22, and you're 5 wins from 40. But that was the big issue. And what a lot of these schools are saying is that if the SEC and ACC and the Power Fours get more power in the selection committees, more of our teams are going to get kind of screwed over on selection days, because you're gonna have SEC and more Power Four ADs on the committees that are they're gonna fight for their team, right? Currently, the NCAA officials are in active negotiations with CBS and Warner Brothers Discovery over an idea to expand the men's and women's basketball tournament to add 4 or 8 teams. And I think you could do this in baseball too. Just add more teams, make the tournament bigger, longer, bring in more money. which is what they're trying to do with basketball. They're just trying to bring in more money at the end of the day. Bill Wallace, I got to wonder how much liability and operational costs these conferences and universities will have to take on to leave NCAA, but it's getting old watching NCAA run things. Yeah, that's the thing, Bill. I mean, this isn't something that they can't just say tomorrow, all right, we're leaving and even if they could, right, they signed the 10-year agreement. So there would have to be something in that, a clause in that agreement that allows them to leave. But that is 100% true. They would need a whole years of infrastructure probably to prepared to make that decision. So I don't think it's something we're going to see happen soon. I think 2035 is going to be a big year, because if all of a sudden you start hearing, oh, the Power Fours are kind of building up this infrastructure and everything, then it's probably happening. But it's certainly not something you can do overnight, especially with seasons coming up in baseball and basketball going on right now. It's just not something you could do right away. And like you said, how much liability and operational cost are they going to have to take on without the NCAA kind of sharing revenue with them and everything like that? Not to say that they couldn't do it, right? Because they definitely could. But it's just there's a massive size of infrastructure they're going to have to pull that off. And that's not something that takes days or weeks or months, unless you got Elon Musk running it, then maybe he can get it done famously faster than anybody else. But it's probably something that's going to take years of infrastructure to be built up. Canes, they were just as bad as Miami in non-conference play. Yeah. And that was the difference, is that LSU finished better. You know, Florida was knocked out of the tournament, SEC tournament, right away. LSU made it a little bit of a push in the SEC tournament, which ultimately I think that was kind of the consensus, was LSU and Florida need to play well in the tournament to make it in. LSU did that. They had a little bit better non-conference record, but Florida did not. And like you said, they didn't have a great non-conference record, and they still got in. So, I mean, it was a huge controversy. So that's that article, guys. Again, I got a video coming out later today that's going to go in that in depth and kind of the things I think will happen with format changes and everything like that. I do think right now, and you guys have heard me talk about it, I do think that the SEC tournament in baseball is way better than the ACC tournament. So if you're one of the bottom seeds in the SEC tournament, you basically do a play-in game to make it into the tournament. So you're at the tournament, but you got to make it into kind of the pools, and then you just do a normal tournament kind of schedule. In the ACC, you have 4 pools of 3, and they're all seeded. And the thing that I hate is that the bottom 2 seeds play each other first in the pool, and then depending on who wins, the 1 seed knows they only have to beat the team that won. So essentially, in every pool, you have 1 meaningless game. So 4 games in that tournament are completely meaningless. It makes no sense. Whereas in the SEC tournament, every game is meaningful, because you have to win. If you're the bottom seed, like if you were the bottom seed in each of those ACC pools, you got to play your way in. And then in the SEC tournament, the top seeds have buys. So the bottom seeds play in to win. The ones that win play the middle seeds in the pools. And then whoever wins those, it becomes double elimination. And it just flows way better, and they're meaningful games. In the ACC, I just can't stand it, because in every pool, there's 1 meaningless game. And it gives the 1 seed has such an advantage in each pool, because they know, we're playing the team that lost tomorrow. We don't need to throw our best guy. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to bring in any of our good bullpen arms. It's a meaningless game. We're not trying to use any of our best guys. So it just doesn't make sense. And they have the bottom 2 seeds have to go 2-0 to win, to get out of the pool, whereas the 1 seed just has to beat 1 team. The mid-majors were smacking both of us. Yeah, well, those Florida mid-majors, they're a little bit different than the mid-majors in the Southeast in general, and like Texas and like California, they're just different animals, right? Even in the Midwest, you think of like Wright State Kent State. I mean, you have really good mid-major programs too, but in Florida, I mean, it's just loaded. Canes, ACC is terrible, but it is good for the higher-ranked teams. Yeah, no, it's great for the higher-ranked teams because you're going in there just thinking, okay, we're going to watch this first game, get some scouting in, and then you don't even have to focus on the other team. Whereas in the SEC, like I said, in these tournaments, every game should be meaningful. And it's just brutal that you have like a game against two teams that have no chance. And like, it's like, why are we even playing them? Just send them home. Why are we risking injury and playing? And I guess you could say, well, that one game may determine if they get into the tournament, NCAA tournament or not. But it's like, all right, well, let's make it meaningful then. Let's just match the SEC's format. The SEC's format is so much better. The ACC format is just ridiculous. I don't really like that 12 teams get into the NCAA tournament. When I was playing, it was not 12, it was 8. So, because I don't like this is my other thing. I don't like that the 12th best team in the SEC can win the SEC championship. That just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like the tournament should be selective. I mean, you should have to be even 8 teams. You kind of think about it, you're like, golly, why isn't it just like maybe the top 4? But then that wouldn't be much of a tournament. You wouldn't make much money on it because there's not going to be that many games. But I just don't like the 12 teams getting in and then like a team that did not great the whole regular season gets to win the championship. Like I remember my freshman year, we were 22-8 in the ACC and we won the regular season title, or we split it with Virginia. I can't remember. And then it was like, oh great, we won the regular season title. Like who cares? Because it's not like you get like, it's not winning the ACC championship. And then we didn't do great in the tournament that year. We didn't win it. And then my sophomore year, I think we had so many injuries, we barely made it into the tournament, and then we won it. So it's, but we still had to be the 8th seed. We weren't the 12th seed. Now you have teams, like I said, that are like 13-17 or 12-18 in conference, and they have a shot to win the championship. It just doesn't make sense. That's my thoughts on it. I just don't think it's best for the game. And it's certainly not right for the teams that dominated the conference. And then they're like, we dominated and these teams got just bullied all year. And now they're in the championship game. I think you should get more rewarded for your performance over the course of the season than kind of what the tournaments allow. But that's it. That's what we're in. And who knows, maybe at some point with the way this is going, every team in the conference is going to get into the tournament. And then it's going to be like, why are we playing a regular season? Is it going to go from, with all these extra teams being added to the conference, like Georgia in the ACC, for example, you got Cal, Stanford, SMU, which is probably going to get a baseball team soon. All of a sudden, you're going to have so many teams. Now we're going to go to 16 teams in the conference. Derek, should players that receive NIL have to use that money towards their scholarship, which will free up more money for other players? I'll say this. Well, they shouldn't. I don't think they should have to do that. A lot of schools are using, especially before this scholarship limit increase or unlimited increase occurred, a lot of schools were using their NIL money as scholarships. So it was like, hey, we've given out our 11.7, but here's NIL money that's like the same thing. So that is what they were doing. But now, Derek, the schools that can give out NIL money, they're also going to have a high number of scholarships. So like, you're not going to have to use that NIL money for scholarships anyway. And like I said, at a school that's not increasing from 11.7 right now, they probably don't have a lot of NIL money to give out anyway. So it's not like a player would be able to use it for a scholarship anyway. That could change, but right now, the only schools that are giving out a lot of NIL are the schools that are going to be at 20 plus scholarships next year. So it just doesn't. It's not going to be utilized like that. I don't think they should have to do that either. I think it's their money. They're getting paid. They can use it whichever way they want. It's probably smart to do that if you're not getting a scholarship. But usually if you're getting NIL money, you're probably on a scholarship as well. like I said, now with these changes, beforehand, when you could only give out 11.7, there were schools doing that. It was basically like, hey, we've given out 11.7, but here's NIL money for your scholarship. So that is how it was being used. But now with all these changes, a school like Clemson, if they're going all full rides, when they give out NIL money, you're already on a full ride. So you use that whatever you want. But guys, remember, we got the ARM program out now. If you're interested in an ARM program that's simple, that I used myself, scan that QR code. I'll leave it up there for a few seconds. If you're interested in just hourly consulting, so if you're somebody that you're not sure about a recruiting advisor yet, and you have questions about the recruiting process, and maybe you've got like a 13-year-old son or 14-year-old son, and you're kind of just getting close to the process and want to kind of have answers or questions answered, and strategies on what you need to do to kind of maximize your exposure, scan that QR code right there, and I'll meet with you for an hour and talk about that stuff. And then, of course, if you are looking for help in recruiting, and looking for a personal advisor that's going to lead you through the process and set up, maximize your exposure by getting coaches to know your schedule, interact with you, send them video and stuff so they know who you are before the summer starts. So then ultimately conversations can start. Scan the QR code up there right now to meet with either myself or one of our advisors that will talk to you about what we do, and then ultimately see if it's a fit for you moving forward. So appreciate all the questions today, guys. Quick question from BA. Okay, perfectly timed. Quick question, read prospect camps. Is it always recommended that players email the coaches in the days leading up to the camp, right to the entire coaching staff? What I would say, BA, is send an email and send a DM on X, because these guys get emails nonstop all day. Because there's a lot of recruiting services out there that just mass email. They don't really know these coaches. They just have their emails in a database, and they mass email every program in the country. So think about that times 1,000, and that's going on all the time. Also, they're getting emails from their administration and everything like that. What separates us is we know these guys personally, so we don't send emails. We text and we call them. So when our clients are going to camps, we just text and call them and say, hey, my guy's coming to the camp. Let me know what you think. He's going to be, and we've already sent them information on what they do in position and video and everything, so they kind of know them generally. But we always follow up and say, hey, going to the camp, so they know. But I would email and DM them on X if you can find their account on X, because they're probably more likely, if you do both of those, they're probably more likely to see it. So yeah, Canes, thank you again. Yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. Well, snow day in Atlanta tomorrow, maybe 5 or 6 inches. I may not have internet, so we'll see. I'll keep you updated on X. Depending on what happens, I may not be able to do a stream tomorrow, but certainly we'll be back Monday, depending on what happens tomorrow. So wish the city